Sara, The Only Way Out, Chapter 1. The corridor stretched on, seemingly endless. The girls wailing. It clawed at the cowardly brickwork behind the blotched paint. Ragged, broken breaths, a woman's body cold on the floor, a dark, murky liquid curling in thick ripples. A sob. A residue of despair clung to strands of hair matted to her cheek. A moan, caught in a place besieged by death. The very air seemed to writhe in unspeakable pain. The small room seemed to brace itself, keeping a life at the brink through the night. Yet perhaps those efforts would not last much longer. Because those pupils tightened into spirals, suddenly going vacant. In a heartbeat, the small body staggered forward, like a self-portrait of doomsday, destiny seeming prearranged. No refusing, no changing. Slender hands clenched a glass bottle adrift in the dark, trembling as they lifted it high. In her jet-black pupils, the reflection of a wild man slumped as if pleading for forgiveness. How shameful that reflected image was. A light in her subconscious flicked on, once and forever. Then wind came, slicing lengthwise through the void. So quick. Then the force came down, cleaving the choked silence in two. So hard. Shards of glass burst apart in an instant. The poor child's arm dropped limp, bereft of any feeling. Did the tragedy fade with it? At last the girl found the answer. No, nothing at all. Lids slightly parted, jet-black pupils. Sara. A child steeped in ambiguity, a dangling confession with white clouds. Golden sunlight slashed the void and lit a fragile silhouette. She sat there on an old chair, inside a room washed in immaculate white, beneath a bleak roof that belonged to nowhere and had no certain shape. If she could close her lids and imagine, a few scrawled lines surfaced, a few iron bars flickered, strewn. If she could press her hands together and wish. A few more strokes gathered round, and a small bird spread its wings and twittered. Iron bars and a winged bird, a phantom painting and a fading girl. Perhaps the bars were raised to protect the shy life of that little bird. Or perhaps that very strength was built to strip away the freedom every living thing deserves. If so, is Sara truly alive? The lines ended. The question hung. The jet-black pupils gazed into an empty span of air. At times reality and the subconscious blend. Hard to tell them apart. Sara saw herself holding a withered pen. She saw she could not fill in the correct answers beneath all the pictures she always saw whenever white smoke closed in. She also saw herself sweeping everything aside, even if chains might bind her mind and make her writhe in obsession and pain. After all, these had never been questions the child herself had posed. A white strand fallen over her ear drooped at some point. Sara became aware of her own unfocused gaze and slipped out of the stream of thoughts. Maybe the golden light could not wake her from the suspended dream. Maybe the cut that split the pure white void was not enough to make that cluttered heart yearn back. And yet it was just enough to kindle a flame that shook the frame. A new world slowly rose before her eyes. A world arriving from warped reality. A world arriving from a circling subconscious. A drumbeat unifying the realm of chaos. A cadence soothing a hazy heart. Tiny green motes drifted in from nowhere, hovering in the void. Hand in hand, bringing color to a parched canvas that fog had seemed to swallow whole. As if lifted from a picture book's magic, they shone, curled, then tumbled. As if a web were cast to bind, they flowed with the void, covering every gloomy corner from before. As if alive, their motion flickered with each breath, caressing a small ear. That instant changed everything. Sara suddenly found both her arms set neatly upon a long table, polished bowls and plates, and the waft of dishes. She saw window mullions taking the sun etched at the edge of her vision, the dark brown painted courses of floor tile, even the not-so-flat folds of a curtain whenever the breeze came. The small room seemed at last to find its own self. Warmth unfurled like dancers at the ridge of ear and nose. Strands of light needed a shape for life. Her heartbeat on the left surged strangely. Her ears, who knew since when or why, flushed red. Sara leaned forward with a readiness she could not explain. Silence clogged at her throat. The backdrop resolved itself around a small kitchen. The figure of a girl moved in and sat opposite. A long skirt, hitched higher than usual, brushed past. The collar skewed on a wrinkled white shirt. Long tousled hair wove with a weary sigh. Eye met eye. On one side, jet-black pupils full of haze, lashes a touch shy. On the other, crimson pupils flashing pride, sharp, long lashes that would bow to nothing. The schoolgirl, all nonchalant, sat there. With a flick of chin, she glanced at Sara, then reached for a huge hunk of bread, tore into it, wide-mouthed, eating in silence. Crunch. A sound floated up, perhaps at the same time, and both girls' cheeks puffed without thinking. Sara chewed while trying to map the flavor in her mouth. Likely she too was eating bread. It helped trim her confusion a little. At the same time, the jet-black pupils shifted of their own accord, and the set adjusted. A dark brown wall strip settled to her right shoulder. A rectangular doorway appeared as a matter of course. There, the presence of one more figure. A woman hurried in, wearing a plain white nurse's outfit, hair in a neat bun, a caregiver's tunic to the knees, trousers of the same color, loose and easy. Though the wrinkles on her cheeks betrayed her age, every time her eyes crinkled, the smile they made offered a strangely infectious lift. Seemingly unaware of Sara, the woman fixed her gaze absolutely on the paper in her hand, while the shoulder bag at her side was nearly torn loose by the floor's beguiling pull. What on earth was that sheet to draw her so? To make that opposite smile so beautiful? So wondered Sara as orange roses unfurled along her arms, as butterflies stroked a vague sensation at her ear, as a forest dusted with powdery pollen mingled with a lofty wind that seemed to see the child off into a suspended dream. Until, click, a jagged sound rang. The breadcrumb broke on the floor. Golden light tilted toward sunset red. The threading wind turned chill. A reflex turn of the head, Sara left the table. Left the dream forest. She felt her bare feet drink in, more than ever, the cold of the long floor. Slowly she looked back over her shoulder and witnessed yet another figure arrive. A camera lens shoved into the frame before it drew away. A pair of calloused hands, ill-fitting, closed around it. Only then did the man's portrait appear. Green uniform, a shuttle insignia on the left chest, a build blotting out the dusk. Like the woman, he too smiled beneath eyes measuring a new angle for the next shot. The world seemed to congeal inside those jet-black pupils. The familiar words wrote themselves once more. Sara, a child steeped in ambiguity, a dangling confession with dim clouds, sunsets red cutting the void to light a fragile silhouette. She sat there on an old chair, in a room faint with tiny green motes, beneath a roof that had only just found its true shape. If she could open her eyes wide and feel. A few scrawled lines came up. The warmth of two women slid in at some point to lean close at the child's shoulder. If she could lift a hand to her chest and doubt. A few more lines gathered round. The man, careful, adjusted each small detail before his warmth hastened to seal the one missing gap. A bewildered blink. Even Sara hadn't thought the scene would resolve like this. Air stroked her thin skin. The breath of life hid in cold patches of night that the young moon ferried in. Hearts trembled beside flowers blooming on a stained ceiling. The picture had only just been completed. The photograph had only just been taken, as if a moment of a real family, as if a moment where happiness sprouted. Sara blinked again. Pale lips pressed tight. Fingertips went still. Her heart fluttered once. The air around her then was so gentle. The kitchen of a small family, and Sara seemed one of them. She felt she could smile guilelessly. She felt she could drift to sleep in the cool breeze. And yet that air was also uneasy. Strange figures and a chill inside an empty space. Sara felt her heart race as if lost, felt gravity thin with each breath. The road split with no signpost, no pilot to guide. The cool surf stroking her feet on gold sand and blue sea could turn storm at any time. Thankfully, Sara did not have to choose at that instant. Amid the tangle of canvases and doubts, a foolish sound elbowed in like a reminder of the reality right at hand. The wind veered and the moon shifted. The TV body hidden in the corner quietly appeared, as if it had been there from the start. The screen ran white-black stripes like a foreign whisper of an ill future. Leakage hiss gnawed the room, growing until the jumbled letters knit themselves into the title of a dull evening news. Psychology, behavior. What is the relation between the two? How far can psychology drive behavior? Other lines marched on. When emotion spills past its vessel, it bursts out in many forms. Anger, ears and nose flush. Grief, tears soak. Helplessness, teeth grind. Red drips, or adrift, falling into a spinning dream and losing one's former self. An ear listened. Lashes flickered. The mind pictured. Sara's attention was seized. The unexpected message seemed to draw her out of hovering doubts, stretching a hand to pull the little girl into a bubble of imagination, hidden deep within the mind. There, in what might be called a familiar place, she realized she was sitting opposite the others. Her soul branching, sliding with the winds, moving deeper into their subconscious. There, where time's flow and common sense no longer mattered, she could see through them, see them laugh, watch them weep, understand them, come closer, reach out and help them, so that, in the end, she could dispel the fog inside her own mind. Even so, nothing was so easy. On the path Sara took, on the path along which she strove to spread her wings, she always got halfway before the wind that had carried her away ebbed, and she vanished. That small soul fell to a withered lawn. Truth was laid bare before her again and again, never changing. She could not climb to the lofty clouds alone, could not meet another's eyes alone, could not enter their minds alone. Still less could she fathom the currents within herself. She slumped by a towering trunk and found herself far too small. But even so, those small feet always rose again. At least her gaze had never once lost its flicker of flame. Perhaps that was the sole thing not hazy about her now, the lone compass keeping her soul from fading in the wind's revolving sky. And now every gaze turned back towards Sara. In a world less airy, beyond the dream bubble. 3 pairs of hands from 3 strangers set on her shoulders. Vague, and with scarcely any feeling at all. A white strand swayed across her brow, pale lips parted, jet-black pupils hung heavy. Sara studied them one by one, faces unclear, feelings unclear, as if their souls were not here, as if hers wasn't either. No one spoke to anyone. A dumb land ruled, an empty land draped in white, as if a suspended dream. Reality had somehow drifted far away, as if a pit in the subconscious, the only exit accidentally buried under a ruined old capital. And then, a bell outside the door rang, slow and echoing. The big door behind Sara flew open. An icy wind sliced flesh and blew away every tangled aftertaste. She turned toward it. A wall of white stretching to the infinite seized her fading pupils. The green motes around her were drawn into it one by one. The colors of the phantom world were quickly washed by pure white rain. Twisted figures crawled, clinging to the child's legs. Their bodies slowly melted under the last faint warmth of sunset. The poor child, skin and flesh bleeding under the scraping of slimy corpses on a rotten floor. Breathe in. The scream compressed at pale lips. Breathe out. A tear beaded down a flushed cheek. Eyes closed. The world of common sense fell and shattered. Eyes opened. The question of what was real perhaps still had no answer. At least that was all Sara could recall for now. Gleaming pupils filled the frame, a deep mind as if just woken from heavy sleep. Tiny tears still clung to damp lashes. Reflected now in those black pupils was no gentle gold sun, no throbbing dusk, no longer a whiteout of snow. Even so, what existed was no more positive. A soulless ceiling hid in dreamy dark, and the poor child seemed to lie motionless in a corner after a long journey. The world wheeled. Time's current mingled with warped common sense. Enough trouble. A broken pause was necessary. Cook. Cook. Only now did a complete sound echo. A coughing fit snagged at the throat, mixing with the metallic musk of rust. As if an alley after stormy days, the ground stamped a slick print into Sara's palm as she lifted it. She heard a displeased click of the tongue before she felt her teeth grit, and she forced herself up. Her crown stabbed as if struck by 1,000 hammers. Her body became keenly aware of aches rioting along every fiber. Her vision now was almost a perfect 0. A little time was needed for both sides to acclimate. A ruined child and a feral night. She sat and steadied her breath. In a heartbeat, the true change arrived. Every feeling in her, lingering haze and unseen pressure alike, froze at once. All went completely still. Sara held her back straight and looked ahead. Instinct told her to. Her ears imagined the urging whispers. Of course, the night was all that showed in her narrowing eyes. But was that all? The question dissolved into a deep sea. Foam lifted, peeling to the blue surface like an answer. At the end of sight there seemed a road without end, a corridor running with memories as it fled, a glimmering exit like light at a dying cave mouth. Sara widened her jet-black pupils as if to take it all in. And unexpectedly, tiny green motes returned from the void. They hovered before her chest, stroked the palm that opened unconsciously, caressed the calloused skin, unguarded. Their light lit her gloomy eyes at once. Their force wasted no time blowing off the night. Their body forged into glittering hands and pulled her from the sucking mire. That light would surely show her the way. It led her back to scraps of memory from the old world she had missed. Remnants of the suspended dream, the kitchen collapsing before her, the little house dissolving at her shoulder, warmth and life slipping into nothing without a last word. Somewhere the bell had stopped. The window had been broken. Snow began to fall and cold bared its teeth at a careless prey. How vast the world outside was. A dead-eyed crossroads ahead. Sara stepped toward it. Faded lane stripes. 3 familiar silhouettes flickered. Cold wind oozed from blood and flesh. She reached without thinking, and her legs locked, rigid. How strange. How unfair. No one waited for her. No one looked back. Until she clenched her teeth, shattered the ice, and lunged forward. Fingers splayed again for a nearby warmth. And just then, a car from nowhere cut across the road and sent the small soul back to silent reality. The light hovering by Sara now, surely it would keep showing her the way. It led her to the center of a completely new world, one built from courses of brick carrying the aftertaste of earlier ruin. And now Sara stood here. A clock's tick-tock whispered at her ear from afar. 2 hours had passed since the old world collapsed. She must have fully sensed time's trickle by her ear, or at least the spacing between numbers on a clock face surfacing and sinking in the unreal. A blink. Rubble rose under green light. It swallowed almost all the space around. Scrap iron strewn, stones in disorder, white dust in the air, rust and mildew and a smell far from pleasant. Twisted cars lay around in heaps, as if sneering at integrity or taste. Like stray children, dragging themselves through wet alleys night after night. Below her left shoulder, a doll's head had just dropped from a battered body. Sara looked with a complicated gaze. An empty toy. A thin, hazy memory. She stood on such earth. Strange, estranged, spent. At the very center of the debris, a passage appeared oddly. It ended far away, where the light of floating green motes embroidered wayfinding arrows. A door set between 2 great stones. A breeze brushed her light white hair. Sara looked back. She really had no other choice. Footfalls echoed in the subconscious. She moved forward without thinking. Only one narrow path existed. She claimed the last strips of ground. The beating of black crows' wings did not fade. The cold at the finish line in a few seconds made her brows pucker. Face to face, out of drunken dream, she set both hands to the knob, not surprised to find it entirely rusted. She hesitated a moment. Then the creak sounded. The door slowly opened. Tiny green motes rushed close to the child's careful eyes. Their mission wasn't over. The arrow shapes of guidance melted away, and in their place, a vague figure was embroidered for a brand new charge. The shimmering silhouette crossed its legs, bowed slightly, set one hand to chest, the other raised wide, like a butler offering a ceremonial welcome. Behind those courteous hands, behind the thin door, a corridor ran into black with no clear end. Sara stepped on. Her feet touched cold tiles. She kept an eye on the red-brown paint along the walls. A little familiar. No. She cried within her turning heart. Very familiar, in fact. The air of the 2 worlds was the same. In temperature, both bore a cold that seeped into flesh nearby. Even so, something subtle had shifted since someone stepped through the aged door. Did she feel it? Her lids no longer half closed. The surrounding loneliness sank away. Her fingers began to clench. Pouncing fear rose up. Behind, the door eased shut as her guts burned like a furnace behind rusty bars. Dwarfed between high walls, Sara walked with mixed feelings, half fretful fear, half native curiosity. The corridor was only as wide as a grown man's stride, and its length uncountable if you stared into the endless black. She passed the shimmering butler. He bowed, hiding his face, then stepped into the night and snapped his fingers to light a small pocket, ready to aid the young lady. After a few steps into the hollow deep, the frame began to reveal new things. At intervals, glazed pictures appeared, carefully encased. It felt like touring a museum alone at midnight. Her feet grew heavy as she moved. To the left, a green-painted tank, a frame stamped with a shining shuttle. Her hands twitched. To the right, a syringe and a respirator. Someone's signature ran neat beneath a polite mat. Her white hair was caught, without thinking. A small book and a still pen alternated on both sides, wrapped in simple wooden frames. If the ancient gods' lights always arrived with a sign to seed meaning and strength among mortals, then the works before Sara must stand for something as well. She stroked each frame in a daze. Those slightly numb fingertips felt the feeling on the glass, as though both sides had acknowledged each other's existence in this unreal world. But that was only the prelude. The deeper she went, the more detailed the pictures became, taking up a great stretch of wall on the right. A woman under a hospital's Great Day billboard, wrinkles at the cheek and a reassuring smile, familiar. Across on the left, a man in uniform with his comrades, hands firm on a rifle, eyes toward the sun, the shuttle insignia unmistakable. Beside it, a painting of a schoolgirl standing apart at a corner, balloons and banners circling flushed faces and tight hugs. And then, at the journey's end, Sara froze as the instant arrived. Her small fingers rose again. Her pupils engraved the gloom of the last frame. Scrawled strokes, a warped ground, 4 black hearts revolving at the center of a blank white field that didn't care. Her body turned ice cold, as if frost pounced as she drew closer. The strokes awoke a fierce familiarity that gave her gooseflesh. Her chest knotted in spasms. The tail of her eyes burned red. Her temples and throat pressed as if some vast pressure were rising. It lasted only 2 seconds. Before, the black ink seemed wrong. It bled out. The meaning behind that painting seemed wrong. It bared teeth and claws and lunged. Sara herself felt wrong. She saw her body torn by a pack of starving demons without mercy. The space around could no longer brace itself. It shattered. A rare, ravishing frame. The shimmering butler watched primly from behind. He could not deny how he savored the moment. The corridor curled like a shell, sowing fear. Its fragile quarry clutched her ears. Her whole body contracted as if ready to take a massacre without quarter. And then, in a single heartbeat, all the glass burst. Red sprayed from every suspended frame, as if they could swallow the lone child whole. But as quickly, the green motes hovered in the dreamy void. Ice thawed. The butler's body warped and dissolved into the night. A blue sea rushed in from the unreal and washed the rank red away. A blink. Everything vanished. Nothing remained. Hell reached to lofty white cloud, though it knew that was impossible. The empty corridor hiding in the dark had shed its skin. Now it opened wider, airier, trimmed with ordinary detail to resemble a real corridor. Amber lamps lit the frame, running along stout walls. The pictures were gone. In their place, doors, arched entries. A peaceful painting settled upon a riotous earth after so much dream pursuit. The scent of flowers soothed the dark patches of night. A lullaby comforted the strays who knelt in corners night and day and wept. Even so, that instant did not last long. Sara gathered all her strength to steady herself and stood. In a heaven wrapped with mist, she pried her hands from her flushed ears. Her lips and eyes with them opened a little. Things were not over yet. By her right shoulder, a thin warmth arrived from nowhere. Her eyes darted. The shadow of a child just skimmed the space. White hair ends flying with each skip. Wind rose behind her. Her ears recorded whispered urgings from the void. Lights ran the corridor and lit the bright smile of an innocent child. The clock sound seemed trapped in the room's four corners without exit. The next second arrived, marked by Sara losing sight of that strange child. Speechless, she stood there, feet buried in freezing ice, cheeks blank where her blurred eyes should have been. She raised her fingers to her hair. Her mind compared the shapes, two sides, and the floating likeness troubled her. "Who was that?" Sara asked, a little doubt. It seemed the journey had to continue. She told herself, a little wry, each time the road before her broke, wind and cloud would come to mend it. Each time fear swallowed her heart, some lullaby would bring warmth to break the ice. Fate seemed immovable. Sara could not stop yet. Slender feet rose and filled the frame. Time and breath settled and carried her to a new scene. Left side of the corridor, an arched door opened to a small room. Strangely, she immediately felt the long table clear at the room's center, 4 chairs in a line, as if awaiting warmth to fold around them. Plates set neat and glossy, the hint of food. She saw again the window's sunlit trim at the edge of her eye, the dark brown paint on the floor's bricks, even the rumpled, not-so-flat folds of the curtain with each breeze. The small room quickly found itself, warmth unfurled like dancers at ear and nose. Filaments of light, thought gone, again needed a form for life. Or else all of it was only a wan mirage inside a lonely child's subconscious. The nonchalant girl opposite. The woman's hurried yet gentle air. The man by the window, face alight with his camera. Their presences had only just caressed this cold place. Their breathing seemed to flicker on in Sara's left breast. What a strange feeling. They were there. Surely they were. At least they had been. Then where was Sara within this warm picture? Her black pupils looked ahead, and for the first time the answer came quickly and clear. The only chair left empty, utterly alone. A reflex turn. Suddenly the earlier child was back in view, nestled at her side. A hazy face under white strands looked up, tiny fingers interlaced and pointed to the thinning haze. Apparently the corridor's end. There was something that child wished to show Sara. Another glance back. The kitchen of before. Sadly, at some unknown time, white snow had devoured the warmth the outer sun had built with such care. As the mirage ended, Sara's attention was seized. Pale lips pressed hard, heels pivoted, white hair flew, a sign of some newly forged resolve. She took the strange child's hands, trembling, and perhaps no longer felt surprise at that half-familiar, half-chill existence. Beat by beat, mind emptied, 2 children led each other toward the end of this world. Would the tragedy bind them in chains? Or would angel wings bring floral sky scents to save the lost soul? Sara searched for that glimmer. She stepped each course of brick, guided the child with care. She set a hand upon the wall ahead where the path had reached its end, gathered force, eased her body aside and peered in. A new painting formed within the jet-black pupils. But this time the pen was not the floating green motes. The night itself offered the essence it was proudest of to these guests from afar. A flicker of a broken old TV, black and white stripes spread anxiety over everything. The creak of a dangling ceiling fan, a reminder that reality was not to be trusted. The space opened, big enough to call it roomy, yet a choking weight hovered at Sarah's chest. Two figures on a couch, a small round table opposite, patched rug pieces on the floor. Dim light half-carved two people who had been silently watching the screen's stripes. Their eyes were void, faces warped with long scars, cheeks hollowed dark, breath heavy and ragged. Stamped into Sarah's pupils, a woman and a girl, unmistakable, not strangers. Sara knew them as her body drew closer, entirely unconsciously. She did not even realize when she stood at the room's center. The strange child had found a moment to slip from her hands. A butterfly flickered, lovely. The moon brushed cloud and wind aside to light the drab world. A lone green hue slid across a grand stage. The butterfly wanted to sing. The small wings wanted to show their flight for the world to marvel, but it could not. She couldn't recall the count of times she had fallen into this dead, still state. So she told herself while her heart turned and her subconscious slid toward chaos. She looked ahead. She lifted a hand, hovering. She wished to voice sorrow but lacked the courage. The girl sat there, strong, facing her, enough to make one wary. They had eaten a crisp but tasteless bread together. And now that proud flower had withered in pitiful fashion. The woman sat there, the smile that had made others so buoyant, cheeks touching for a moment, the warmth they shared surely recorded, and now that radiant flower wilted in gloom. Sara remembered them, recognized them, wanted to go to them, to ask what had happened, to reach out, aching for hands to clasp and redden their skin as they crossed the desert of hardship together. The feeling came sincerely, unconsciously, born from a knotting chest, and she did not yet know why she'd fallen into that state. Yet even so, it was as if Sara's existence were wholly ignored. She stood. They sat, two drops mirroring each other. Nothing. The silence stretched a few more seconds before the night tired of the play of hesitation. If Sara could not write, the night would write instead. Bang! It rammed the mournful void. Things began. A door kicked in from far away cracked the air. Soon came heels on floor, shoulders slamming walls, heavy steps punching the wretched ground. Liquor reek flooded the room, a smell that made Sara's eyes fly wide. A few seconds more, beyond the doorway, a shadow arrived slowly. A man in faded gray uniform entered, disheveled, a warped face, clouded eyes, hair a mess, swaying legs, breath short, a half-empty glass bottle in his hand, sloshing. Sara felt fear surge, hard to explain. A fear engraved long into her mind. A fear flaring by instinct the instant his shape filled her shining eyes. Compared with the eager man by the sunlit window with his camera, the contrast now sent a shudder through bone. She clenched her hands to her chest and stepped back, turning her head as if to seek help. But behind her, darkness had swallowed the last hope. On the couch, only the woman remained. Sara saw her body trembling in waves. Oddly, her lip bent up, mocking herself. Not the end. Pounding on a door cracked like a bursting boil, somewhere in the corridor outside. The bleak painting wished it could end itself. Groans like a savage horde writhed as judgmental spikes drove through their chests. The girl dragged numbed legs and pounded door after door in despair. No exit could exist there. The girl, spending her last strength, knew it. Nor would an exit find them. The resigned woman inside knew it. In that gloomy frame, the man sobered from his blissful stupor. What had to come, came. He knelt to the floor and finished what was left. When he drank, his face pinched, his jaws ground tight, trembling hands clenched. His back moved toward the woman. He stepped straight through Sara's cold body, to her astonishment. And then, grinding his teeth, he swung a weighted arm, dumping all his pent-up bile, warping the last weak life left in this dead air, a lost clock inside a spinning maze, red, thick, dripping, a wheezing groan, cut and cut again. There was no resistance. The woman was dragged from the couch. Her knees buckled, she could not move. Tonight's death sentence. Perhaps he had spoken her name already. Why? Perhaps simply because he wished it so. Now he curled blood-stained fingers and raised them. He was ready to rain down as many punishments as he liked on the woman clinging at his feet, until the froth of ecstasy bubbled in his mouth. Seeing it, Sara panicked. The silence lasted the length of a gust across pale lips. Even in that urgent second, her mind kept interrogating her. Deep within, her teeth clenched. Deep within, flushed cheeks and firing nerves marked their presence. When emotion spills its vessel, it bursts in many forms. Anger, ears and nose flush. Grief, tears soak. Helplessness, teeth grind, red drips, or, adrift, falling into a spinning dream and losing the last remaining exit. Sara found herself in every case. The images were unreal, but their weight would not be ignored. For the first time, she felt her feelings blaze this fiercely, since her eyes cracked open to the moment her feet took in the cold of the long floor. The dream world could strip her sight, her memory, her sense, but not her feelings. The next instant, when the man's fist almost butchered the air, her whole nervous system sparked and burst. It found a faint self. It refused to let things simply happen. Sara had to do something. She burned for it. As if that were why she was still alive to this second, why she boiled so. She surged without thinking, shot forward like a ray slicing the void, gathered the tiny green motes that seemed to have waited to scatter cheering magic. Bared her teeth and tore at the gray membrane set up who knows when to bar the meddling outsider. She stamped across the border the dream world had drawn between both sides. Nothing could stop her now. At least, not in this instant, in this world, with this green light hugging her body. That impossible force took her to the goal set from the start. She leapt, threw herself, both arms locked over the man's shoulder and, in a blink, dragged his bulk away from the woman's failing body. It was a moment she could be proud of. At least she had stayed the calamity. Sadly, all that effort still could not turn the field. The impact did nothing. She took the recoil and dropped to a knee, and that impact woke a beast drunk for 1,000 years. Warped reality or circling subconscious. Every realm has its laws. The instant Sara clawed the membrane dividing her from the unreal, every eye rooting in every corner fixed on her trail. The harsh truth was handed down by a god of the dark upon a fragile fate. Because Sara, in truth, was only a passerby. The frame turned with the music and shifted its shape. Dim lights snapped off. All around went black. Then a thick red poured quickly down. The room became a forest gasping, writhing in red fire under the powerless gaze of a lofty moon. Before her, the man's body turned roiling, as if a parasitic brood writhed for exit. Black smoke rose like a last warning before the change. And then, a new body was born. It shed useless flesh and stood upright. A great black form, maw slimed with a strange fluid, eyes burning red with rabid killing. It took less than 3 seconds. Then the shadow turned. Sarah's reflection flashed in its wild eyes before it shot out a long arm and seized the neck of a sorry termite. Needle fingers clamped, lifted the small body, and a feral growl seemed to tear the room and master the flow of time. With another squeeze, she lost her breath. She struggled, fought for control. No use. The coughs cut into sobs that arched at the void. Face to face. The night-swaddled beast brought Sara close to its twisted face. Its rancid breath licked her pallid cheeks. It looked at her with empty pupils. It looked at her with a missing beat where a chest should have been hollow. It looked at her with a surprising softness at dark eye's edge. It looked at her for a few seconds more, until the night, no doubt, returned to remind it of the badge hanging at its breast. That moment came before the killing flicker returned. The madness roared. It flung the thin body far, as if to spend all its primal rage. Luckily, the little girl found a slit and slipped from the near death. Unluckily, the beast lost its tasty prey. 2 poles, 2 separate worlds, seemed to split from that point, measured by seconds and the gaps between cracked tiles. Thud. A dull impact rang. The writhing echo of every muscle climbed to her eyes. Sara rolled on the floor. Everything blurred as her mind sagged under the weight of those crushing instants. Even so, she refused to let surplus feeling rule long. She sprang up. This was her chance. She clenched and rose. Her eyes swept fast to fix direction. Left behind, high walls blocked. Ahead, the black thing, a rabid beast poised over its prey. Right shoulder, the corridor still intact. There, the girl's shape reeled along the edge. There, a woman's warped body, somehow finding a gap, crawled across a clotted red smear. Both seemed to move toward one direction, one place, one thing, and that was what centered in Sara's eyes. Tiny green motes floating where night sat. They drifted like an old friend's greeting. They spun like a sign. They pressed and forged the proud shape of a door in the unreal. The only way out. So Sara thought, for a breath, with shock threaded into a small, relieved sigh. And so, what would she do next? Run to that moony light or stay and fight the savage black behind? The answer could hardly be otherwise. She bit down and turned and ran. She lost balance and fell. She writhed and crawled across the cold floor. She noticed nothing else, thought nothing else. Her limbs shook in waves. Her chest hammered as if it might burst any moment. Bit by bit, she hunted an exit. Wind cut her skin. Pain bloomed raw. Bit by bit, she hunted a retreat. White snow clung and gnawed till blood beaded. Dull footfalls sank into dark air. A blocked throat spread a rasp into the draft. The door was close, within her reach. A growl shredded the still hymn. The walls and the corridor's shape cracked with each sweep of the rabid beast. The shadow was very near its sorry prey. A chase with no balance of power. It would end soon, when the hands met at the center of the clock face, and everything would be done. But before that instant truly came, Sara felt herself stop. She set one hand on the door coated in green dust. Her breath eased, unbelievably still. She turned and looked back. 2 women's shadows skimmed her cheek and dove through the door. The clotted red and wheezing remains outside could count as the past. The beast's crooked maw hurled forward. Its slimy teeth tore the night's quiet ribbon. Red eyes packed with rage. Face to face. Once more, white hair curled like a floating scene. A violin rose, the start of a sorrowful air. Sara looked at the shadow. Her jet-black pupils held a fleck of fury. She looked at the shadow. Her lashes still trembled, fear waiting to spring. She looked at the shadow. Somehow a sense of kin brushed her chest. She looked at the enemy, then back to the two backs fading through the door, then down to her own palm, still twitching without end. The current rose and ferried her where she needed to go, whispering vague words in her ear. 1,000 questions about this scene demanded answers, about this strange world, about the figures behind the haze, about Sara herself. But first, she would have to choose. For the first time since the mist draped this journey, she had the right to do so, to decide whether she would step through the floating green dust waiting by the door, whether she truly longed for the truth still behind the veil. That choice would change everything. Her small heel pivoted, clean and sure. The slight back flashed inside the doorway. White hair flew and hit a flushed cheek. At once the green dust sprouted. Fragrant thorns and blooms spread and closed the floating solo. They left the night and the wild beast behind the stage curtain. The last cue had come. A new space would open. New stories would be told. Hidden truths would begin to show. When those arrived, so too would the road leading deep into a subconscious world woven for Sara alone.